Welcome back to the Wizard Shop, and today we have a true to form barn find that will cost as much as a 2 or 3 year old Toyota Camry to get it back on the road. Let's get started. This is a '79 Chevrolet Nova, and the customer that brought this to us is one of my very, very good customers. I have a handful of customers that I do this type of work for, and I don't think it even goes past one hand of how many of them there are. There's very few people that I will do this kind of work for because this customer will not fight me and argue with me every penny of the way. This customer is good for the money because I've done work for him, and I know that without a shadow of a doubt. He's not going to be calling me up and arguing with me about the methods used to get it on the road. And lastly, when he dropped off the car, he said, this was my wife's car back when she was a teenager. We've had it ever since then, and she has green lighted it. The cost is not an issue, just go for it. Now, it probably won't cost as much as a Camry, that 25, 30 grand. But what if it does? I'm confident this customer would be able to go the full distance if that were the case. I don't think that's going to be the case on this one. This has been sitting in a barn for a really long time, and you can tell as we check this thing out, it's been sitting for quite a long time, number of years, since 2005 I think is what he told me. One of the things that I gave the green light to take on this project is that you could get a 1979 Chevy Nova service manual out, and everything in that manual matches this car. It hasn't been finagled with, it hasn't been customized, they haven't cut the wiring, they haven't put weird stereo systems in it or tried to put a 2JZ engine in it or something really stupid. It's just as it was when it left the factory. That's the way I like to get a car back on the road. And we're going to go ahead and take a look around this thing. It's not been messed with. It's really in pretty good shape. It's dirty. You can tell it's been sitting a long time, but yet when we start looking at it, you're going to be able to tell that it's not been abused. It's not been beat up. Let's go ahead and start in front of the car, look around it, then we'll pop the hood and look at the interior. In the past, I have had several of these scenarios with customers, and they tell me, green light, go ahead and go for it. But when we start getting up to $6,000, $8,000, $10,000, and $12,000, they're like, whoa, 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 stop. I don't have that in the budget. That is way above and beyond what I thought about. This is getting out of hand. And that's when I decided, unless I know that the customer's good for the money, I'm not taking on these projects. So if you think about you're going to call Crazy D in the office, I got this car, it's been sitting for 10 years, I've got $1,200 in the bank, forget it. It's not happening. I will not take your project. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started and look at this really sweet car. This is some of the last years of this Nova, this body style. This is square headlights with a very simple grille. You can see it's got some electrical tape holding the grille together. The bumper has not been wrecked or hit into anything. So many of these old cars that come out of a barn find, it seems like always the front bumper is in the shape of a V. They ran into something. Those tires are obviously going to be no good. They will go in the trash. We'll pull the wheels off and have them reconditioned so new tires can go on. All the original badging and belt line molding and everything is still intact. As you can see along the rocker panel, no rust bubbles. It's not caved in, not in horrible shape. Looks like it's got the stock exhaust, which is great. I like to see that. There is a little tiny bend or something there in the molding, but that can be easily fixed. As you can see on the back here, Panhandle Chevrolet in Texoma, Oklahoma. That's where this car originated, where it came from, and the whole story of this car is in that area, Guyman and around that area. Got the square Nova taillights, and again, the bumper is intact. It's straight, not even one ding. They haven't been backed into Grandpa's John Deere or something crazy. It's left the way it was when it was in the factory. The moldings are still intact on this side. Again, no rust holes in the bottom. There's the junky old tires. Those are absolutely trash. This is a two-door, as you can see. Again, as we go along the body here on the rocker moldings, no rust, no holes. All the cladding and the molding is intact. The roof even has the original paint. It's not been repainted with Van Sickle tractor paint or something crazy. It's original. And the nice thing is this isn't vinyl. Those are really hard to get redone properly. This is just paint, which is very easy to do, but it doesn't need to be redone. As we do more videos on this, we'll get it washed off and you're going to see that the paint comes alive. It's not really even oxidized, it's just covered in dust. It needs to be washed. Let's go ahead and open the hood. Now on this car, this is still old enough where you don't pull the lever underneath the dash. It's actually under the bumper. It's kind of interesting, it's way under the bumper, all the way down here. So here's the original engine. It is the 305 V8, a 5-liter. It is not a barn burner, it's not a high-performance model. And as you can see, all the vacuum lines, all the factory thermo time switches and vacuum switches, everything is as it was when it left the factory. Nothing's been modified. I like that. I can deal with this, I can work with this. I can look up a service manual if I need data. What does this do? What does that do? I can't do that if it's got the engine out of Grandpa's Buick Wildcat sitting in it or something really crazy or wonky. No, we're not going to LS swap this. The customer wants it as it was when his wife was younger. She wants it that way, just like it was when she used to drive this as a teenager. And that will not be achieved by LS swapping it. So the customer's paying the bill, we will do what they wish to do, not what you guys or not even what I wish to do. So let's take a look under the hood and see what do we see that's not supposed to be here. One of the things I see is mud dauber nests, which a car's been sitting, that's understandable. These are the types of things you can expect to find in a barn find. You can also find footprints from, it could be small mice, could be a possum, who knows? But there has definitely been things walking around on top of the air cleaner. Luckily they didn't chew any of the wiring. It all looks to be intact. Another thing is we can have mice that crawl into here. It's possible. Let's take the air cleaner lid off and see what we see under that. This is a tiny little air cleaner. Nothing really. If something got in here, it would have been able to walk around the perimeter of the air filter, but it wouldn't have been able to get into anything. It's got a 2-barrel carburetor, which it will continue to have. We're not going to fuel inject it or do anything crazy with it. It'll just be the way it was when it was fairly new. So no, we're not going to hook up a battery and try to crank it today. I value that this engine could be a very good engine. It just needs to be refreshed and gone through. We're going to change all the fluids, check the belts, antifreeze, go through everything and make sure it's good. I can tell you now that the fuel system is shot. We're going to have to drop the tank, check the condition, make sure it's not rusted inside or something's really wrong. All the fuel lines are going to have to be flushed, the fuel pump replaced, the carburetor rebuilt. I already know all those things because the fuel's been sitting in it for all these years. It can turn into varnish and it just destroys any kind of seals or gaskets or anything like that. It's going to be ruined. Any car that's a barn find, that is always the number one thing, is the fuel system. I've had a couple of Porsche 928s that were barn finds and I did get them running, but it was so expensive because it had the Bosch Jetronic system on it. It cost more to go through the fuel system than it did the rest of the car. And the common thing with the customer is like, why is $5,000 going into the fuel system? So I tell them, here's the parts list. You go online and check the prices yourself. And I get a phone call the next day and they're like, good God, you're not kidding. This is crazy. The fuel distributor, the warm-up regulator, the accumulator, the fuel pump, it just goes on and on and on. And a frequent thing that I have gotten into with these barn finds is as we're halfway through, we're almost getting to the finish line, I hear the same thing. I almost wish I never started this. This is costing way more than I thought it would. If I could go back in time, hindsight being 20/20, I would not have had you do this, Car Wizard. Not necessarily because of the work you're doing, but because of the cost involved. As we're itemizing things and we're looking down everything that had to be replaced, the customer's like, oh my God, this is crazy. I never knew or even thought that it would take so much to get this thing right. It's a common misconception that the customer makes, that they think, okay, I've got $8,000 into the car, so every single bolt and everything on here is brand new and perfect. I can drive to California right now. And that's so far from the truth. Just because I got it running doesn't mean it's ready to hit the road. As we get this car running, as we get this car driving, seals, gaskets, everything's going to start failing. And I've actually gotten phone calls, I've got $8,000 into this car and this thing is leaking oil on my driveway. Yeah, bring it back because we're going to put another $2,000 into it. It's just going to keep climbing and climbing and climbing. Once you get something like this running and you get it back on the road, and you start putting miles on it, we're not going to road test it for 500 miles. But once you put 500 miles on this, there's so many other things on this car that are going to start to give out. They're going to start to have issues. This is going to start leaking. Maybe it's a brake hose. Maybe it could be the pinion seal on the differential, which wasn't leaking before. But after 500 miles, it will be. Now the argument could be made, why didn't we just replace everything on here? And this typically because we run up against a customer's budget and they say, I can't go any further. So we reach 8 or 9 grand and the customer says, no more. This is as far as I can go. Well, that cuts me off because now I can't address the other things that are going to leak after 500 miles. So these kind of situations for a shop owner and for a mechanic can turn into a nightmare. The customer finds out that this is way more expensive than they thought. The mechanic can't go any further because the customer has run out of money. So he takes it home as is, and we only made it so far. The other items that we didn't get to because the customer ran out of money now start leaking. And then there comes the mentality of, I have 8 grand in this car, everything should be fixed. No, you stopped us short. There should be 10 or 12 grand into this car. There's a blue 928 that you guys have seen in here. It's light blue. He's another great customer of mine. He understands this scenario. We got it running, we got it going for him, and he kept a running list. He'd say, fix these 2 items, and then I'll drive it for a while, and then we'll see what else it needs. And a couple other items would come up, and he'd bring it in, and we'd take care of those items until it got to a point where he was happy with it. But he didn't fight with me. He understood that's what it's going to take. We got it running. I know now other things are going to start going wrong, so let me get it out there and drive it. Then I'll try it and see, oh, now this needs some addressing. Okay, let's take care of that. I'll be back next time with a couple more items and we'll see where we go from there. I really enjoy doing with a customer like that. Let's take a look at the interior now. I'm not trying to be harping or be negative about this situation. I kind of enjoy getting old cars like this going again. It just needs to be an agreement between the customer and the shop owner that there's a mutual understanding of what's going to happen here. The price could shoot up fast, and the customer needs to be able to say, that's fine, let's go for it, I still want to do this. So, as you can see on the headliner, there's a tiny little hole, a little push-in or whatever you want to call it, but other than that, it's intact. It's in good shape. There looks like an old trap shooter, a Cobra trap shooter. That's really old, a radar detector. Wow, that thing is old. I don't even know if it still works or not. It does have a crack in the windshield. We'll probably be putting a windshield in it, I imagine. The dash, amazingly, is in good shape because it's not been out in the sun. It's been in a barn. So the miles are on it. It says 32,000. It could be 132,000. I don't think it's 232. It's in too good of condition to be 232. There's a battery that the customer supplied. We'll be putting that in once we're prepared to start the engine. We're not at that point yet. You can see it has an old knob style JVC stereo in it. That would have been put in probably in the 80s. That looks like a 90s stereo. Probably early 90s. Here's B&B Sales in Guyman, Oklahoma. Like I said, that was the area this car came from, which is the Dust Bowl. That's where the Dust Bowl happened. These seats will be reupholstered. The driver's area has a lot of little tears and rips in it, but other than that, they're in decent shape. It's going to be reupholstered with the original type woven fabric with brown vinyl. The back seats are in decent shape. The parcel shelf looks like it's been reupholstered with black fabric in the past and some speakers. But that can be easily removed and put original style fabric. And since there's already holes there, we'll probably put some sort of a speaker or something there so the radio works again. So we're not going to sit in the car because it'll probably tear the seats even more. And it's all kind of dusty and dirty in here. We don't want to get dirty. But at least we can take a look inside of here and see that it is definitely a good candidate. Luckily, being this is a 1979 and it's a simple Chevrolet, I don't have to push any buttons to put it in jack mode or something really dumb. I can just put the lift arms under and go for it. This is the good old days, guys. So being it's set for so long, since 2005, if it had a leak, it's leaked out by now. You're not going to find active current running leaks on this thing. But we can look at some of the areas where there's accumulated mud or whatever where a leak could have been. But we're just going to take a look under here and make sure it's not rusted or rotted through or anything. So you can see some tape hanging. We'll go ahead and take a look here. I can guarantee the shocks are going to be shot. Wheel bearings are going to have to be repacked or maybe even replaced. It looks like somebody put a new fuel pump at some point. Maybe they tried to get it going or something, but maybe it's new enough we don't have to replace it. We'll have to see. Even if they replace that in 2005, if old gas is set in it all this time, it's still ruined. It's still no good. This hose, you can see it's caked on grease and it's been sitting a long time. That's going to burst when we get it going. So we're going to replace that. We'll put all new belts. These power steering hoses will probably start leaking. See if anything loose here. The brakes are still got some life left in them, but we're going to replace them anyways because we don't want the linings coming apart while he's driving it. Something bad could happen. It doesn't make sense to try to make old brakes try to work again. The brake hoses will probably be replaced because they get brittle and crack and break. It's not like it's already starting to get brittle and do. Ball joints, those are probably going to be replaced. They're been sitting in one place for a long time. Radiator, we'll have to pressure test it and see once we get to that point. It may still be usable, we'll have to see, but if not, it may have to be replaced. It doesn't have a thermal clutch, it has a flex fan. So that's probably still usable, probably nothing wrong there. Motor mounts, you can see that oil had gotten onto them at some point and it's been sitting that way for a long time. Those are typical things that once you start driving it, 200 or 300 miles into it, they just snap in half and break. So we'll probably need those. Let's move back to here. I can still see paint on the oil pan. It's light blue colored. That tells me that it probably was not leaking in that area before it was parked. Here's the transmission. That's probably a TH350. 3-speed. That seal is going to need to be replaced. I can imagine that this speedometer O-rings inside of this drive is probably going to leak. This is the beginnings of a unibody frame where you kind of have a frame, a subframe, and then it just stops and the rest is bodywork frame. Tri-shaft U-joints, they might be okay, we'll have to see. So many of these old cars from the 70s and 80s, the floor pans are gone. You can actually stand in it like the Flintstones and push the car. But this one is all intact. It's not even got surface rust. It's amazing. It's in good shape. I really like to see that. It gives me a good feeling about the rest of the car. We can see this subframe mount right there. That'll have to be replaced. It's all cracked and destroyed. Do you see what I mean about this mud here? It looks like oily mud. That tells me that this seal was leaking at some point and slinging it everywhere. And then this U-joint, it seems okay at the moment. Drum brakes, we'll have to take those off and check them out. Probably put new wheel cylinders and shoes on it. Has the stock style old muffler on it, which amazingly is still intact and in decent shape. We'll have to see what we do there. It may just have to go to an exhaust shop if the customer wants to replace all of it. But that's something right here that can break. The old rubber, it's brittle. Everything I'm pointing out, keep in mind, we're adding more bucks, more money. Fuel tank will have to come down regardless, because we're not going to chance gumming up the fuel system. We're just going to pull it down and go through it, check it out, and make sure there's no pinholes or anything wrong or rust inside of it. If it's good, we can reuse it. If not, we'll have to get a replacement gas tank. You can see these bushings right here on the leaf springs. They're all dry rotted. They're literally cracking in half right here. Those will have to be replaced. They won't last probably 500 miles and they'll be shredded. While we're back here, another thing I like to see is this area here is not all rusted out. It's still good solid metal. This is a good candidate for getting it going again. There's what look like holes, but they're not. They're just something rubbed on it. Solid. In good shape. Let's go ahead and get this thing on the ground. One of the good things a customer has going here is that as far as Novas go, they made thousands and thousands of these, which means parts will be available. Now, how many of them are on the road? Even though this is a barn find, it's still in good shape compared to a lot of them that are sitting in the backyard of somebody's house. These aren't as cool as a Corvette like the 66 Vet that's behind me, or some of the really sweet Mustangs of the 60s or something, but is it worth it? Yes, it is. It's still going to be a really cool car. Also, it's very much worth it for the customer because of the memories of this car when his wife had it years ago when she was a teenager. To get to drive it again and have it back on the road, it's totally worth it to them. Is it worth it money-wise? Will they get their money back out of this car? No. No, they won't. Probably not even half of it. But that's not what it's about. That's not why they're doing this. This is not an investment. This is more of, I want my old car back from when I was in high school, and I've got the money, plenty of money to do it. Let's do it. And I'm happy to do it. Now, out of 100 customers that might want something like this done, there's probably 1 or 2 that I would actually take on the job. Most people, I will decline the job. I really need to have a foundation with the customer, done work for them for a while, and get to know them a little bit better before I take on a job like this. It's not something I'm going to take on if you just call my guy up, hey, I'm sending the car. If I don't know you, I haven't done work with you for a while, I'm probably not going to take on your work. The customer made a comment, this car's been sitting since 2005, so obviously there's no rush to get it done. This is going to take a long time because my day-to-day work, cars that come in for a quick brake job, cars that come in for a quick oil change or a quick little job, this car is going to be pushed off and it might sit for a week or 2 and I won't touch your car again. But when we get some free time, we'll pull it back on the lift, we'll continue on with what we're doing and keep going and keep trudging along. It's not going to be done in 2 or 3 weeks. There are people and companies and mechanic shops out west in California that do those types of things in a month or 2, but they're going to charge you $40,000 or $50,000 to do it. If you want it done somewhat more reasonable, it's going to take a lot longer. It's going to take a long time to get this one going. So you guys are going to see this in the background. You're going to say, well, why is it still sitting here? Because it's going to for a long, long time. But when we get updates on it, as we get things fixed and have new revelations and things that we find on the car, we'll let you guys know. We'll do some videos on it. It's going to be really cool to deliver this back to the customer, back driving and running again. It's going to be really cool. I look forward to that day. If you're curious what kind of tools to use to work on these types of cars, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. All my tools in the shop are listed there for sale, and we get a small cut. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button already, I really recommend you do that now. Many more cool projects to come. Thanks for watching.